Hey everyone, so if you've ever been a language teacher, you know this for a fact. Making a good test, it's way more than just scribbling down a few questions. Today we're going to break down the actual process, how to design a language test that really works.
Which, leads us to the big question, right? How is a good language test made? I mean, really made. It's not about trying to trick your students, that's for sure. It's all about getting an accurate picture of what they've actually learned. And to do that, you need a solid process.
Okay, so you can pretty much break the whole thing down into these 5 main steps. First up, you have to figure out your purpose and goals. That's the why and the what of your test. After that, we'll talk about making a blueprint, actually writing the questions, thinking about the test day itself, and then what happens after the test. So let's jump right into step 1.
All right, first things first. And honestly, this is the most critical step of all. You have to figure out the purpose of your test. Because without a clear why, what you have is just a random bunch of questions. That purpose, it's going to steer every single decision you make from here on out.
And this brings us to this really important idea called test usefulness, or NṳNG dung. It's actually a pretty simple concept, but it's super powerful. A test is only useful if it does the job you designed it to do. Plain and simple. So before you even think about writing a question, you've got to know exactly what that job is. So how do you nail down that purpose? Well, you can start by asking yourself these kinds of questions. Like, are you just trying to put a cap on a unit? Or are the results going to help you plan your next lessons? A really big one to think about is beneficial washback. That's just a fancy term for the positive ripple effect a good test can have on both teaching and learning. You want the test, and even studying for it, to actually be a learning experience. Figure this stuff out and your test will have a real direction.
Okay, so once you've got your why figured out, it's time to move on to the what. What exactly are you testing? This is where you have to get super specific about the skills and the knowledge you're trying to measure.
We call these the abilities to be assessed, or NṳNG. And listen, this is not about some vague topic like grammar. No, it's about defining very specific things. For instance, are you testing if a student can use the past tense when they're talking? Or are you testing if they can just spot it in a sentence? Those are 2 totally different skills, and that distinction, it's absolutely critical.
And here's a huge takeaway. Your objectives need to be all about what a student can do, not just what they know. The focus has to be on performance. So a bad objective is something like knows email vocabulary. A good objective, the student will be able to write a 3-paragraph email to ask for information. See the difference? That's something you can actually see and measure.
All right, your purpose is clear, your objectives are set. Now you're ready to build the test's blueprint. Think of this as mapping everything out, the structure, the content, before you even dream of writing question number 1.
This blueprint is officially called Test Specifications, or bangdatta kithateti. Most people just call them specs. And yeah, it's basically the architect's plan for your test. It lays out all the details, the sections, what kind of questions you'll use, how many points everything is worth, the whole scoring plan. Having this guide is so important for making sure your test is balanced and actually, valid. Now, for a typical classroom test, your specs don't need to be some super formal, complicated document, but they really should include these 4 key things. If you map out the structure, the skills, the question types, and the scoring plan beforehand, you save yourself a lot of headaches. It stops you from accidentally making a test that's all lopsided or one that doesn't even test what you wanted it to. This plan just keeps you honest.
And now we get to the part everyone jumps to first, actually writing the questions. But here's the thing, when you've got that solid blueprint in your hand, this whole process becomes so much easier and way more effective.
Okay, here is a golden rule you have to remember. Each question, or item as it's called, should test one thing, one single objective. That's it. If your question is testing, say, vocabulary and complex grammar at the same time, well, if a student gets it wrong, you have no idea why. Was it the vocab? Was it the grammar? You just don't know. So you got to keep it clean and focused.
Now, take a look at this. This is a fantastic example of a really well-designed question. The person hears, "Where did George go?" The right answer is C, obviously, but the real magic here is in the wrong answers, the distractors. Each one is there for a reason. Option A checks if the student is confused about yes-no questions. B checks if they think the question was why, and D checks for when. This is brilliant because it means the wrong answers tell you just as much as the right one.
So before you ever print out that test, you have to review every single item. A checklist like this is perfect. You ask yourself the important questions. Are my directions crystal clear? Is the language I'm using in the question itself simple enough? And here's a big one. Is the task authentic? Does it feel like something people do with language in the real world? Going through this review process, it's absolutely essential for a quality test.
Look, you can create the most beautiful, perfect test in the world, but if the day you give the test is a mess, the results just aren't reliable. So this step is all about the actual test-taking environment.
And the key word here is consistency. We call it test administration reliability. All it means is that every student has the exact same fair shot. That means, a quiet room, instructions everyone can understand, and proper timing. At the end of the day, you want to test their language skills, not how well they can focus when there's a bunch of noise.
Okay, so the students have all handed in their papers. You'd think you're done, right? Not quite. Now comes the last, and maybe the most important part, what you do with all those results.
First, let's get a couple of terms straight. There's scoring, or 점điểm. That's the mechanical part, just adding up the points to get a number, like 85 out of 100. Then there's grading, säblad. That's when you take that score and decide what it means. Is it an A? Is it a pass? They're two different steps, but they're obviously connected.
And that brings us to, what I really think is the most important part of this whole thing, feedback. Just giving a student a number doesn't really teach them anything, but giving them clear, specific feedback, that turns the test from just a grade into a real learning tool. It creates that awesome beneficial washback we mentioned at the start.
So, to wrap things up, I want to leave you with this question to chew on. If you really apply these steps, from figuring out your purpose all the way to giving great feedback, how can you make your next test not just an evaluation, but a genuinely powerful learning experience for your students?
This video is brought to you by the IELTS Focus Zalo 084-7705-973, an English center specializing in IELTS preparation.